Now, each of these logos, the ones on the A4 page and on the flyer, should actually align vertically within the areas that we've placed them. So on the A4, there'll be an image panel here, so this will actually sit vertically centered in the image panel. And down on the flyer, we actually want the same thing, but based on the height of the document itself. So there are a few different ways to align objects inside of Illustrator, but there are some basic rules regarding that. Basically, it's possible to align objects to each other, which you would expect, but it's also possible to align them to the artboard on which they're on, which can be very, very handy. It's important when you are aligning to artboard to make sure that you do have the actual artboard selected, or make sure that you're on the right artboard. It is possible to say align artboard, choose an item over here and say align, and it'll move it onto that artboard if you do accidentally tell it to, so do bear that in mind. Let's come over to the artboards panel and make sure that we double click flyer so that we know we're on the flyer artboard. And let's drop down our preview size so we can see what's going on. Now, if we go ahead and select the Italia logo, we can bring up the Align panel, which is over here on the left-hand side, and you'll see that we have the default options for aligning left, center, and right, and also vertical, top, middle, and bottom. And then also distribution, which we can play around with a bit later. But the most important thing here is the Align To option. What are we aligning this object to? Well, currently, by default, it's set to Align to Selection, which basically means to itself, which doesn't help us in this point because we've only got one item selected. What we want to do is choose Align to Artboard, okay? When we do that, you'll notice that this icon changes and it looks very much like an artboard with crosshairs on it, so do get to recognize that so you can see it in future. But also importantly, in the control panel up here, it's now accessed a series of align options. Before we didn't see them because we would need two elements selected in order to align them to each other. Well, because we've now got the logo and we're telling it to align to the artboard, we can do so directly from here. So in this case, I've already got the right hand alignment fine. We want to align it vertically centered, so we can come up here and click on the vertical center alignment, and that will nudge it down into the exact center of our artboard, which is very cool. Now, let's go across to our A4 page and try the same thing. So go to the A4 sheet, close the artboards down, we can pull up the Align palette if we need it, and go ahead and select the logo again. We know we can do a horizontal center by clicking the icon here. Perfect, that aligns to the artboard. Let's undo that because I do want it to stay on the right. But if we do vertical here, we're going to encounter a problem. Again, it's going to work because it does it to the artboard, but what we want is to align it to a shape where the image is going to go, all right? So we need an extra step here. Let's just undo that. Come over to our Layers panel on the right-hand side, and let's go ahead and use our keyboard shortcut to generate a brand new layer called Images, all right? Say OK and make sure that we move it down so it appears below the logos layer. That's very important. Now we'll make sure that we have nothing selected, and we do want to select our images layer so that when we draw our new rectangle shape, it's going to appear on this layer, okay? So come over to your rectangle tool, come over to the upper left-hand side of our document and intersect with this guide and the left-hand side of the page. In fact, we can just scroll across a little bit here. Let's now click and drag and draw a rectangle that fills that entire top section down to that first guide right here on the right hand side, okay? Now you'll see that's come in on the images layer, so let's make sure we can see the logo that's above it by choosing maybe a light blue here, okay? Very Italian coloring at this point in time. So go back to the main selection tool so we don't accidentally create a new object. But now what we can do is, with this item still selected, hold down the Shift key and also select the logo. The items here have changed because we've also got distribution, because we now have more than one element selected. But because we're on artboard, if we did now say we want to vertically align these, you'll see that they both shift to match the artboard. This isn't what we want. We want to use something called a key object. Now you can choose key object from here, but what I like to do is leave artboard selected, because key object you can actually do in a much simpler way. All you need is, when you have two elements highlighted, without using the Shift key, click once again on the item you wish to align to, all right? And what you'll see is a large border now appears around the outside. This is your key object. Now when we do alignment, you can see that the graphic has changed. There's actually a little key in here now. So when we do our vertical align in this case, the logo is going to align to the key object. When we deselect that, our alignment function goes right back to the artboard. So if you changed it manually to key object, it's going to stay as key. If we leave it as artboard, you know that we have this third selection, if you like, shift, and then click again to specify our key object. Very, very important there, and worth bearing in mind for whenever we need to align anything from this point on. Now, while we're here and in anticipation of adding further images, we should probably also have a panel over here on the A3 page. So what we can do is Option copy essentially the blue panel that we've already got. Let's close this down for a second, and even just a line will do fine. Let's hold down our Option key or the Alt on the PC, click on our blue image shape and just drag a copy right across so it snaps over onto our left hand side here. And if you don't want to snap, we could just make sure it aligns on the guides, but then we've got our artboard set, so let's say align left to our artboard, and this highlights the problem that I mentioned a second ago. Even though we've got an object on a page, because we're not on that artboard, it's not physically selected. When we say align to artboard, it's going to align to the currently selected one, which is still our A4. You see the black border here as opposed to grey. Important thing to bear in mind. So just undo that. Let's come over to our artboards and make sure we double click A3 poster to isolate that artboard. Now when we choose our align to artboard function, it will work just fine. Now whilst we're here, let's hit E for free transform and just scale this out to fit the width of our page right there. And this is ready for when we drop an image in later on.